We get health checks for ourselves. We certainly do that for our children. We do it for our cars. We do it for our home appliances. Why in the world would we not do it for the businesses that we run?
Welcome to the Insurance Refocused podcast, where we're highlighting real agent stories and how they are innovating to respond to the changes and challenges happening in the independent insurance industry. My name's Lindsay, and I can't wait to introduce you to my amazing co-host, who just so happens to be my mom, Carey Wallace. Mom, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Lindsay. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I am pumped for this solo episode. I know we as a team have been spending a lot of time on getting people updated valuations, getting people updated benchmarking reports. We have some clients that do like evaluation, a benchmark like every single year. So today I was actually kind of hoping we could just talk about why is that? Because, I'm on a lot of our front lines like calls when people are interested in working with us and they just want to learn more about what we do. And sometimes I'll recommend, hey, we should do a valuation on your agency. And I get one of two responses. Oh, yes, that sounds like a great idea. I would love to learn about my agency. And then the second one is, I'm not selling. I don't care about the value of my agency, right? So there's a lot of benefits in between the spectrum of those two things, right? That you can learn about your agency. So I was hoping today we could spend some time talking about what those benefits are.
Yeah. So, and there is this misnomer that the only time you need evaluation is when you're selling. The reality is evaluation is in essence a health checkup for your agency. It's giving you a baseline of where you are today, what things are driving the value, which risk factors exist inside your agency, and where's their opportunity to potentially do something different inside your agency that even if you're selling in 10 years from now would put you on a trajectory for maximizing that value. But we recognize, there's an investment that goes into getting a valuation, and not everybody wants to do that. There is another way to get a health checkup of your agency, and that is by benchmarking. So, and it goes through the same process where you provide your financials, et cetera. But the whole goal around benchmarking is to identify the things that maybe are different inside your agency that set you apart, and opportunities for you to potentially look at your business in a different way. The reality is anyone who runs a business, including us, if you're working in your business all day long and your head is down, it's really difficult to see some of those things from, 30,000 feet that might be things that we need to think about differently and understand the health of our agency. So a benchmarking report can give you that 30,000 foot view, and also identify some areas that you might want to take a deeper dive inside your agency and think about the strategy around how you're going to scale and grow your agency. So, we can dive into a couple of those things that you find out when you either go through evaluation or a benchmarking process when it comes to agencies, if you'd like.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the things too is just like paying attention, right? Like that's one of the most important things. Like I've been doing helping a lot of agencies do data submission. And there are times when agencies are looking at their book of business and I'm like, okay, just confirming. So, Wallace Burger, Lowe's Food, and Light Shade Plus are your top 3 clients. Is that correct? And they're like, well, I guess I didn't realize that client got so big. Like paying attention and understanding your book and knowing what's really important to your agency can be super, super important. So yeah, let's dive into some of those areas that you think impact an agency's value absolutely the most, that agencies should pay attention to both on evaluation or a benchmarking report, like kind of in that like health checkup space.
Yeah, I think number one going through either process gets you to see, do I have strong financials? Am I reporting in a way that's actually accurately representing my agency? And by having a second set of eyes look at your financials to see, how are you reporting revenue? Are you including your contingency in your revenue? Can you get to what your true growth rate is as you compare it to industry benchmarks for growth for your size agency? Those kinds of things are just basic. But then as you dig deeper into your P&L, do I classify things the same way that other agencies do? So when I look at a report that has benchmarking, am I even looking apples to apples? So our process in the benchmarking does some of that data cleanup for you. Whether you do a valuation or you do a benchmarking, we reclassify your financials to match those benchmarks as best we can in evaluation based on the categories you put on your financials. But if you do a benchmarking, we actually go down to the transaction level so we can make sure that the benchmarks we're providing you include the same kind of expenses across the board. And that in and of itself can actually give quite a bit of insight to an agency that may think they're doing great because they're picking out certain benchmarks. How much am I spending on my people? How much am I spending on my marketing? How much am I spending on my technology, et cetera? And when they look at that, they're actually feeling really good about it. But what they didn't know is most of their technology is sitting in subscriptions. So they're not looking at some of the other benchmarks and they can't figure out, why am I off in overall profitability? Because when I look at certain things, it looks like it's super great. Well, if you're comparing apples and oranges, you're never going to actually see that insight. So the data cleanup part is actually kind of helpful because the reality is accounting and insurance is different than other organizations or other kinds of businesses. So if you're using a bookkeeper that's used to looking at plumbers and marketing firms and insurance and whatever, they could think they're doing it correct for you, but they're not following our standard categories, and they might not even be doing all of the entries appropriate for trust accounting, for example. So,
and when we say not following our standard categories, it's not agency focused standard categories, right? It's the categories that independent insurance agencies should be using. That's pretty standard across, if you're working with Agency Focus, Reagan, Marshberry, INS Capital Group, like any consultancy, or, company that's continuously looking at agency financials. I have a question, because we also get quite a few agencies that are transitioning internally, right? So they're transitioning generation to generation. Why should they care about this?
So oftentimes when someone has run a business for a really long time, they've got a strong gut feeling about how to run that business. They've been doing it. They have muscle memory. And the new owner coming in, might not have had line of sight on their financials. They don't have the same depth of experience to rely upon, which is not a good thing to rely upon anyway. But the reality is, taking this deep dive can actually get the business pretty healthy and give everybody comfort in knowing when one agency owner is exiting and another one is elevating to that role, that we've taken a good hard look at what expected revenue should look like, what expected expenses look like, what is the profitability going to look like, what are some questions we should ask ourselves about compensation of the exiting owner and the incoming owner, what hiring needs do we need, and will they be able ultimately, will they have the cash flow to pay the exiting owner for their ownership in this agency? And if we don't ask ourselves those questions, you could arbitrarily come up with a price in your mind because you've heard of other people selling an agency, and you should say, I want what I hear other people are getting. You set the price. You don't do the work. You don't compare it to industry benchmarks to even know if it's realistic what you're spending in each category. And the next thing you know, 3 years into a transition, it doesn't cash flow anymore. Some things have come up. They've had to hire differently, lost a big account, etc. You had more risk factors in your agency and the cash flow's not there. And now we're renegotiating the structure of the deal because we didn't do the work up front to figure out what would cash flow. So that's one of the most important things you should do if you're internally transitioning is make sure you know what the expected cash flow is. You know what the risk factors are inside your agency that could cause that cash flow to change and what's dependent on that exiting owner's relationships or expertise, etc. You could lose staff in that transition. You could lose accounts in that transition. And it's not, I'm fully aware I sound like doom and gloom of the things you could lose. You could also gain, but just having a full picture of what those factors are as you're mapping out what that transition would look like, having a benchmark of your agency compared to industry averages also gives the sense of peace of, hey, this is a solid agency that I'm stepping into ownership. How else would you know if you don't know how you compare to the industry benchmarks?
Yeah, 100%.
I guess I'd put it to you, Lindsay, if you were going to make a huge financial commitment to take over, let's just hypothetically say that was an opportunity for you, what would you want to know as an incoming owner?
Well, I mean, I definitely want to know where the growth of the business comes from, right? And can that be replicated and is it transferable? I'd want to know what my retention is, right? Like, and true retention, right? Not just rate increases of premium. I'd want to know historic profitability of the company and also recent growth of the company. And growth, I'd want to flesh out, if I could, what's rate increased growth, what's acquisition increased growth, and what's true organic growth.
Yeah. And then you'd want to know, like, are there allegiances to the current owner that might leave, like immediately say, hey, when you leave, I'm leaving. And not just customers, but what about staff, like key staff that you would really depend on that would put you in a situation where you immediately have to hire and retrain someone before you even start, like, day one? Or, do I have confidence that everyone on the team is on board and going to stay? Like, there's no guarantees ever, but staffing changes in a transition can create a lot of disruption. And the number one thing that causes staffing changes is compensation changes. So knowing if your comp structure is appropriate could be one of the biggest drivers to a realistic value of your agency. It makes up more than 50% of the expenses inside an agency. So if your comp structure is off, it will become very difficult to make that up. And if you start changing comp structures in a transition, you could lose those key employees that are really you're counting on for the ongoing performance of the agency. So I'd want to know, are my comp structures right? And can I be profitable with it? Or do I need to make changes? And I would hope the exiting owner would make that comp change before the transition ever happened. So right. I feel like I'm starting on solid ground. We had one agency that this was their challenge. They went through a benchmarking process and, they were a great agency. They were operating right around a 18% profitability. So for all intents and purposes, it was okay. But when you looked at their breakdown of their expenses, their compensation was about 65% of their expenses when it should be in the 50 to 52% range. And when we dug deeper, that meant they couldn't invest in tech the same way as other agencies. They luckily were located in a part of the country where their occupancy expenses were lower. So it was actually, if you just looked at the growth and profitability, it looked okay. But when you dug deeper and found out what was happening, they were going to leave some serious money on the table if they could right size their compensation and move their people into a comp structure that made more sense. They actually could operate closer to a 30% profitability. And by identifying that, this agency could change the value of, this was a $3+ million agency in revenue. It could change the expected value of their agency anywhere between $4 and $6 million just by getting their compensation realigned. And listen, it's not an easy thing to do, but once you're aware of it and you have time to work on it, you can absolutely position yourself to have something much more valuable. But if you waited to know that information 6 months before you're selling, there's no time to right size that. You're really going to leave that to the next buyer or the next owner to change that compensation. And they would risk losing the people, potentially losing the staff. So they're going to discount your agency knowing that they have to make those changes. So it is really important to have a health checkup of your agency, especially if you know on the horizon you're thinking about a change, whether it's internal or external. And the reality is everybody will change ownership at some point. We all at some point will not be the owners of the businesses we run. Right?
Yeah, I think Bradley recently did a post about this, that the only two final destinations for any business is to sell or to close down.
Yeah.
So why not always, even in an internal transition, that is a sell, that is a sale of your agency, why not be optimizing in order to sell? If you're not optimizing in order to sell, you're literally optimizing to close your doors.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah. And if you're not optimizing to sell at some point, guaranteed you're leaving money on the table, because that transition of ownership is going to happen and someone else is going to benefit from you not doing the work in order to make that happen. And I'd love to see the people that built the agency benefit, not the buyer. Listen, I'm not biased. Like, I'll help any buyer find the right agency, and we'll help any seller, put their agency. But the best situations is when it's a win-win-win. When the seller feels like they get a fair amount for their agency, when the buyer feels like they probably paid a little bit too much, and the agency is solid and can operate into perpetuity without major swings because nobody paid attention to the risk factors inside the agency. It's really the best scenario when someone feels like they sold a little bit too low and someone feels like they spent a little bit too much in the same deal. You have a fantastic deal. So a couple other things that you find out in benchmarking. Compensation is the easy thing. It's also on the minds of many people. Some of the things that agencies can figure out that they don't understand retention rates appropriately. You might have great new business numbers. You might have solid profitability, but what you don't realize is your retention is the thing that's causing your agency to not perform appropriately. And that could be that, if your profitability is really high and your new business is great, maybe you're not staffed appropriately to do the work in order to retain the book. Maybe you're expecting your people to manage too large of a book of business, or you're not leveraging technology to allocate resources to be able to get to the retention. And your producers are having to work double time to get new business as the other business is going out the back door. So it's important to know some key metrics inside your agency. Everybody should know what their new business growth rate is. Everybody should know what their retention rate is. And I mean revenue retention, policy retention, premium retention. Everybody should know their real profitability or EBITDA, operating profitability or EBITDA. Everybody should know what their revenue per employee amount is and what each CSR's service person's what book of business they're managing. If you know those metrics, you can start to compare yourself to other agencies to say, are we outperforming? Are we expecting too much? Is our capacity right? Is our growth rate appropriate? Are we able to grow profitably? And if one of those numbers is off, it tells you where to dig in a little differently. And then, the other metric I would say is spread, which is your revenue per employee versus your compensation per employee. That's the number that can help you know what is causing your profitability to be off. That's a great indicator of what the ongoing profitability of the agency would be. If your spread is in line, your largest controllable expense is in line, everything else typically falls in line as well. But these are just indicators. They're not the end all be all. There's a couple metrics that are starting to change significantly as the marketplace changes. So you can't overly rely on one metric. You have to have a good feel for all of the metrics.
Absolutely. 100%. So if you're an agency listening to this and you are thinking some of these things are things I don't know about my agency, or I might need to start paying attention to, this is what we do here at Agency Focus. So we are happy to help you in that process, get some of these metrics figured out and help you understand how to change them if it's something that needs to be changed. So please reach out to us. We would love to help you. We are in the business of helping agencies understand their financials. Any final things you want to add, Mom?
I would just say, as people that run important businesses, this might be your largest asset. And if not, it's probably in your top 5 largest assets. Not doing a health check of your business could really cost you quite a bit. And so I would, part of my planning, I would really focus on getting that health check and figuring out how to set my goals for the next year based on the performance of my agency. Not what I think it is, but really getting that unbiased view. So, we get health checks for ourselves. We certainly do that for our children. We do it for our cars. We do it for our home appliances. Why in the world would we not do it for the businesses that we run? So if you haven't done this, I strongly suggest reaching out, finding out more, what it takes, and how we can help you understand that and maximize the value of your agency.
Thanks, guys. We'll be back next week with more episodes and look forward to seeing you then.
All right. See you, Linz.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Insurance Refocused podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a review so you'll never miss us. Want to learn more about how Agency Focus can help you grow your agency? Head to agency-focus.com or email Carey directly at carey@agency-focus.com. If you need to get in touch with me, feel free to shoot me an email at lindsay@agency-focus.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.